My mom challenged me to make a meal out of 5 random ingredients. First, I chose mango, and then I chose butter. After that, I chose cupcake. I chose lime. And lastly, I chose sugar. So now I have to make a meal out of mango, butter, cupcake, lime, and sugar. And I think I know just what to make. I started by chopping up my mango and putting it in a bowl to set aside for later. Then I squeezed the juice from half of a lime into my mangoes. In a large bowl, I combined my cupcake mix, 3 eggs, some vegetable oil, and some water, just as the box had recommended. Then I melted a stick of butter in the microwave and I poured about a tablespoon into each muffin cup, and then I topped it off with brown sugar, mangoes, and my cake mix. I put my cupcakes in the oven at 350 degrees for 20 minutes. And when they were finished baking, I removed the tops of them and I flipped them upside down so that the mangoes would be on top. So while this didn't work perfectly, it was time to taste it, and man, they were good. Let's make a meal out of 5 random ingredients. The first card I picked was cinnamon rolls. And next I picked butter, so I chose unsalted butter. After that I chose cookies, so I went with pre-made cookie dough. Next I chose hot chocolate, so I went with the hot chocolate packets. And lastly I chose peaches. The first thing I did was grease and line a square baking tin, and I flattened my cookie dough into the pan. Next I laid out my cinnamon rolls on top of my cookie dough, and I brewed some hot water in a Christmas cup for my hot chocolate. Don't come at me, I celebrate Christmas year-round. Next, I painted my hot chocolate on top of my cinnamon rolls and I stuck them in the oven. While that was cooking, I browned some butter and caramelized my peaches. When my cinnamon roll cookies were finished baking, I poured my caramelized peaches on top and I gave it a try. Ten out of 10. My mom challenged me to make a meal out of only 5 random ingredients. First I chose sugar, so I went with a powdered sugar. Then I chose strawberries, so not that weird so far. Next I chose cheese, so I went with like a cream cheese. Then I chose pastry, so I thought it would be easiest to just go with a puff pastry. And lastly I chose jam, so I went with my favorite jelly. So now I have strawberries, powdered sugar, cream cheese, jelly, and puff pastry. This is gonna be a piece of cake. I started by cutting my puff pastry into 6 even rectangles. Then I placed them on a baking sheet and cut a border. And then I poked holes in the center so it wouldn't puff up as much. I combined a 1/4 cup of cream cheese and a tablespoon of jelly in a small bowl. Then I spooned that mixture onto the center of my puff pastry and spread it out. Next, I sliced my strawberries. Once they were all sliced, I cut the slices in half, and I topped my pastry with them. Then I put them in the oven at 400 for 15 minutes. I sprinkled some powdered sugar on top and bam, so good. My mom challenged me to make a beef stew with only $10. First I got beef and a flavor mixture packet. I also got beef broth, carrots, and potatoes, which I tried to juggle. I got an onion for 42 cents and some celery costing $10 exactly. I literally have no idea how this costed exactly $10, but here we are. I started by cubing some onion and putting it in the crock pot. Then I also cubed some potatoes and put those in the crock pot. Then I began cubing my raw beef. I made sure these were about 1 inch thick and I put them in a bag with some flours to evenly coat them. Then I began to brown the meat and I poured it on top of my potatoes and onions. Next I sliced some carrots and celery and I combined my beef broth with my flavoring mixture, and when it was all mixed I poured it on top of my meat and veggies. Then I put this whole stew in the crock pot on low overnight while I slept. And first thing in the morning I tried it and this was my response.
Whoa. Wake you up? It's a Cassie dance at 6 a.m.
I'm gonna eat that whole bowl too. And I in fact did eat that whole bowl because it was amazing. My mom challenged me to make a meal out of mac and cheese, barbecue sauce, a jalapeno, and ground turkey. This was about to be a meal that I would never forget. People just don't tell you enough that you need to be really careful when cutting a pepper.
Maybe not. Yeah, it's gonna be. Yeah, I would just put.
I got jalapeno on my nose. Oh, that made it worse. Needless to say, it was pretty painful. So I chopped it with scissors instead and threw it in the bowl. I mixed these ingredients with my hands and added barbecue sauce. My goal was to make a barbecue jalapeno turkey burger. So I formed the patties and stuck them on the frying pan. As you can see, the consistency and texture of these burgers was not what I needed it to be, and I was running out of time, so I turned it into ground turkey instead. I drained my macaroni pasta and added cheese.
3, 2, 1.
As you can see, I do not look very pleased. So I think we're gonna chalk this up to a fail and eat some mac and cheese on its own. My mom challenged me to make a meal using 5 random ingredients. First, I chose strawberries. Then I chose eggs. Then I chose almonds, and almond milk is literally just water and almonds, so I went with that. I chose a salad dressing, and then I chose hamburger buns. So I'm working with a pretty weird assortment today of strawberries, salad dressing, hamburger buns, eggs, and almond milk. To me, this sounds a little bit like French toast, so let's try it. I poured a quarter cup of almond milk and an egg into a measuring cup and mixed it up. Then I dipped my hamburger buns into the mixture and put it on a frying pan. This was gonna act as the French toast, and when it was done, it looked like this. I washed my strawberries and then I sliced them. And here you caught me eating a snack. But then I drizzled the strawberry balsamic dressing and added some strawberries for topping. And while it wasn't perfect, I kind of learned that salad dressing might actually go well with French toast. Let me know if this is something you would try in the comments. So recently my mom's been challenging me to make a meal using 5 random ingredients, but I've never made one this crazy. I chose blueberries first, and then I chose my favorite cheese, blue cheese, and then I chose ground beef. So I went with ground beef burger patties, and then I chose sugar. And lastly, I chose lemon. So now I'm working with blueberries, ground beef, sugar, lemon, and blue cheese. This is crazy, but it might work. I started by making a blueberry reduction sauce. After washing the blueberries, I added 2 teaspoons of sugar, the juice of half a lemon, and 3 tablespoons of water to a pot set to medium heat. I let the blueberries simmer until they had essentially deconstructed. Then I strained the mixture to get all the blueberry pulp out. At this point, my blueberry sauce was a little bit thin, so I put it back on the stove to thicken it up. I knew the sauce was thick enough when I could scrape my spoon and see the bottom. Then I began cooking my burgers. Once they were done, I added my blueberry reduction sauce and some blue cheese crumbles, and man, it was good.
That's really freaking good.
In celebration of hitting 3 million new followers, you guys challenged me to make an Oreo cupcake with Skittles frosting. I'm really not sure how this is gonna turn out, but 32,000 of you guys wanted it, so here we go. First, I put a whole sleeve of Oreos in my food processor and blended it to a dust. Then I added in my white cake mix, 3 eggs, vegetable oil, and water. Then I used my hand mixer to mix it all together for 2 minutes. This part tasted pretty good. Then I filled my cupcake wrappers with Oreo cupcake filling and I put it in the oven. Next came the tedious process of separating the Skittles. And now it's time to make the frosting. I combined a cup of butter and a tablespoon and a half of vanilla and creamed it, and then I added in 2 cups of powdered sugar. When the cupcakes were done, I set them out to cool. Now it's time to melt the Skittles. For the record, I would not recommend trying this at home. The candy is super hot to the touch and will virtually ruin your dishes. Then I divvied up the frosting and I mixed in the melted Skittles. Lastly, I frosted all of the cupcakes and topped it with a Skittle. Now this whole process was super fun, but trying it, well... My mom challenged me to make a meal using 4 random ingredients. I started off by picking tuna. Then somehow I'm supposed to add walnuts into that. And then this really strong seasoning called thyme. And lastly, some garlic. These are all some pretty strong flavors, so I'm interested to see how this turns out. I remembered I had some croissant rolls in my fridge, so I decided to start off with that. After I preheated my oven to 350 degrees, I began rolling out my croissants. As I was putting my croissants in the oven, I realized that the ingredients that I had sounded a lot like tuna salad. So in a small bowl, I combined the tuna, a tablespoon of mayonnaise, a handful of walnuts, some garlic pepper, and some thyme, and a tablespoon of cranberries. Then I cored and sliced an apple to add into the tuna salad for some texture. Then I mixed it all together. Then I put the tuna salad in one of the croissants as a filling. The warmth of the croissant roll mixed with the coldness of the tuna salad was so perfect! I wanted potato chips, but they're really hard to open, so I decided to try to make them myself. I used my mandolin tool to thinly slice my potato. Next, I put my potato slices in boiling water and let them sit for a couple minutes with some vinegar. Once they had soaked, I strained them and put them in a bowl, and then I patted them dry. Next, I put my potato slices into a frying basket, and then I fried my potato slices in oil set to 350 degrees until they were golden brown. Next, I tossed my chips with some cheddar cheese seasoning, and I added in some cayenne pepper for some extra spice. These chips looked delicious, but there's only one way to find out. And in fact, these chips are Cassie approved.